Hey there, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. We are Renzo and Monica Ortega. We're the co-founders of a marriage ministry called 𝗕𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗲, and we are the co-hosts of a podcast called Pre Cana with the 𝗕𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗲. Our mission is to restore confidence in marriage and family life, and we rely heavily on the intercession and the wisdom of St. John Paul the Great.
Yeah, and today, so we are happy that you're part of this event. We are going to be talking about natural family planning, and specifically why it's different than sorry, this is going to be super unscripted, as are our podcast episodes too. But we're talking about why NFP is different than birth control.
Yes.
And I know that in the other talks you've heard why we don't use birth control if we're Catholic. What am I doing?
You're shaking the table.
I'm shaking the table. Sorry, I'm too excited. So yeah, I know in the other episodes, I know in the other videos, you heard about why Catholics don't use birth control. But sometimes the question does come up of like, well, isn't NFP the same thing to use for family planning? Isn't NFP the same thing if you're just trying to avoid getting pregnant? So we're hoping to talk a little bit about that today and dispel any myths that might be out there.
Yeah. So what is the difference between natural family planning and contraception? And how is natural family planning the preferred way to help couples to plan their family and to space children if the need arises for health reasons or financial reasons, psychological reasons? There's a whole host. I mean, I'm not even covering everything, but there is a legitimate reason for like couples to space the birth of their children or to avoid getting pregnant for a short amount of time, an extended amount of time, an indefinite amount of time. So what makes natural family planning different from contraception? And I think the first is a little bit the most obvious, but I definitely just want to make sure that it's covered, is that it's natural. It's using the natural rhythms of the fertility of a woman and the man to make those decisions and to act accordingly. So you're actually using the way that your bodies, both the husband and the wife's bodies, were created to work in God's perfect plan and his design, and to use that as your means of avoiding pregnancy. But I do think that the bigger question is actually not necessarily like why choose natural family planning. Like we get it's healthier and it is the more natural, but like mentally and like from our mindset, what makes this different? So do you want to share a little bit about that?
So St. John Paul said in Love and Responsibility that the difference between artificial means of family planning and the natural way of family planning is that one of them requires virtue. So natural family planning requires us to exercise the virtue of chastity. Because we know the fertile signs of our spouse, or if we know the fertile signs of our bride, and we know that men are always fertile. When we are both fertile, we have to make the active choice of, if we are avoiding pregnancy, we have to make the active choice of withholding sex for that period of time, which isn't something that's easy to do. It requires a mastery of the will. It requires a mastery of our desires, and that's what virtue is our ability to be disposed to the good. So we know that sex is good. We know that children are good and they're great gifts from God. But because we've discerned that during this time, we're not ready to get pregnant, whether it be health reasons, like Monica said, psychological reasons, other reasons that we've discerned that are just reasons to avoid pregnancy, we have to exercise our virtue to not have sex during that time. And that's something that you don't do with contraception. With contraception, it doesn't matter. Your virtue isn't part of the decision, because you could go with whatever desire you want. And because of contraception, you won't get pregnant, or most likely not going to get pregnant, even if, you are in the fertile windows. Whereas with NFP, we know right now there's a very high likelihood we're going to get pregnant, and we are going to choose not to engage in the intimate act until we know that we're outside of the fertile window for our brides. And that's the big difference maker, is that one requires virtue and one doesn't. And that's why with our Christian anthropology, like that's part of why it's okay to be using it, because I know there's a thought that people could use NFP with a contraceptive mentality. And that's not something JP2 ever said. I know that in 𝗕𝗵𝗵𝗴𝗲𝗃. He talks about contraceptive mentality, but he's talking about that related to abortion. He's not relating it to NFP. He's never talked about it in the context of NFP. Because even if you are looking to spathe births, you're not adding something to prevent something natural from occurring. You are choosing to withhold sex during that time because you understand the way the body is naturally working. And again, that requires virtue. And that's why it's not sinful to be able to do NFP.
Yeah. So when using contraception, or even when you think about like a mindset of birth control and of like having control, contraception is trying to use something to prevent something from happening. So you're actually like adding something to a relationship to stop something from happening naturally. Whereas in natural family planning, you are actually like working with the will of God through your discernment and through the way that he has created your bodies to do something that is a greater good for your family at that time. Renzo mentioned the virtue of chastity, but it also requires so much virtue of like prudence and courage, and using like so much communication and openness also between the spouses to really like talk about. Sorry, our dog is interrupting the conversation.
I can edit it out.
But it's like, it's using this communication with our spouse to really go there, to like talk about all these things that could be reasons to avoid or to achieve pregnancy. And again, this video is kind of focusing on the avoiding of pregnancy. But it calls the couple to go over that constantly, to keep reevaluating those reasons, to keep inviting God and his grace into your marriage to make the right decision for your family, because it's hard to be virtuous. Like those times of fertility and you're practicing chastity, that's a united practice of virtue that is difficult. And hard things can be good. Like hard things can be very good for your family, and for your own holiness and your own spirituality. Whereas contraception is removing God from that situation. And it's also just like, it's removing your spouse from the situation. It's preventing the fullness of your spouse being involved in the sexual act. But in practicing chastity through prudence and through courage and through all these other hosts of virtues that you're practicing in this discernment process, it's the complete opposite of contraception, of acting against. It's actually acting with.
And the last part that I want to add, sorry, I feel like I have to get closer. I think you can hear me. The last part I want to add is that because of the exercise of virtue during NFP, we are also have to be reminded that our spouse isn't a means to an end, because we do know that we are reminded of the gift that sexuality is, and the gift that coming together is. Because of that gift that, produces new life, we have to learn to respect that. And also during that time of chastity, that we have to exercise chastity during the fertile periods, if we are feeling like we want to be united with our spouse, we have to find other ways to be united with our spouse. So we have to find different ways of showing and becoming intimate that aren't sexual. So that's another way that virtue exercised in marriage can lead to even greater romance for the rest of marriage. So that's just something that's different that you don't get with contraception. Because again, any desire that comes up can be indulged however you want, because there aren't the same kind of consequences.
Yeah.
I don't like the word consequences, but it's a good word, right? Well,
natural consequences.
Natural consequences that cry later and need diapers.
But yeah, so I think too, the difference between this mindset of birth control versus natural family planning is also the invitation for deeper intimacy outside of the sexual act. So it calls the couple to focus on one another's romance and love, and using those like desires to be intimate and to find other avenues to show that desire to one another through other practical means, helping more around the house, or like having deep, intimate conversations, or spending time doing hobbies that you both enjoy or one enjoys and I'm going to get involved with, or what have you. There's so many different ways to increase and improve your intimacy that natural family planning during times of avoiding encourage you to do. And so it gives you to see it as an opportunity instead of a way of controlling how things happen in your relationship. It's an invitation to dive deeper into your relationship and to, and again, to invite God into that, to allow his grace to flow through your marriage. because now you've invited him into that discussion, into that discernment, and it's now like a holistic, a whole family event.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for listening to us. Sorry for the shaky screen as I keep hitting the table because of my passion about this. But we are praying for you. We hope you have a great rest of the event. And and definitely read Love and Responsibility if you want to learn a little bit more about just the ins and outs of, no pun intended, of the of what St. John Paul has to say about NFP and everything else related to sex.
And if you gentlemen haven't checked it out already, Renzo's going to talk more about NFP specifically for husbands.
All right. See you there.